guys, and welcome back to another episode of Federico Talks Watches in the most temporary set.
Yes.
Because we're never doing this again. Like, the jerry rig, like, you have no idea. Like, the jerry ringing we had to do to fit, whatever. There's art coming, there's a new table coming.
I'm sitting in a booster seat from, like, McDonald's 1997.
Yeah, I wish you could see it. But part of having this new office is bringing you guys more content, so I didn't want to skip another video.
You can.
I'm here with my partner, John. How you doing, brother?
Good, how are you?
Another day.
Another day, it's raining.
It's really, really raining out there. But today, we wanted to talk about vintage watches.
Vintage watches.
Something that, at least I'm going to be honest with, I don't particularly specialize in or have the most knowledge of. That's a little bit more your field.
Yeah, I think so.
It's also not something I personally... I mean, I'm starting to get into them, but, you know, for me, it's still very much a budding hobby, vintage watches. You know, I'm not exactly 100% into it.
It's not for everyone.
But we wanted to talk about it today. We want to talk about some pros, some cons, as well as some pretty rare instances where you can get a ton of value for not a ton of money.
In vintage.
So why don't we start off? We have a few things on the desk here.
We don't do a wristwatch check?
Well, actually, yeah, good point.
Gotta do it.
I'm still wearing the Hulk, no surprise. You know, just rocking it for the past...
That never leaves your wrist.
Well, people have been giving me shit. They're like, dude, you just bought a Hulk, you never wear it. I'm like, well...
Flexing.
Yeah. Actually, not much there apart from fat. What are you wearing, bud?
Wearing the Jaeger Triple Date. It's become a favorite of mine recently.
Well, that's what you've been rocking that almost every video we've made so far.
Some type of Jaeger. I'm starting to sound like someone you may know.
Yeah, well, listen, Tim has great taste, so you're trying to dive into it. Even though I thought you were more of a GP guy.
I do like Gerard Perregaux. The issue is they've started to release watches that are just too large. They're still in that trend.
For all you guys that don't know, John's nickname around the office is Bitch Wrist, because his wrist is like, I'll put it this way, like his ankle is like my wrist.
But that's good because since I am into vintage watches, you'll find vintage watches that are sub 38 millimeters. That's about it.
Fair enough. And actually, we've got a couple on the table that we wanted to talk about. And actually, this is one that's been all over our Instagram. I don't particularly adore it. It's a vintage Chopard chronograph. I don't adore it because of the styling. However, we have to talk about value a little bit.
You have to.
Because it is there. So this is an 80s, mid-80s Chopard, I'm estimating.
Yep.
What makes it special is it's got a JLC chronograph modular movement based on the JLC 898.
Wow.
And
well, who else uses that movement?
Well, that's what I was going to go into. So we owned a watch at Del Rey Watch that looked exactly like this.
Same watch.
Apart from the gold bezel. It was all steel. Same dial layout, same everything, except it said Audemars Piguet on it, right?
We did.
And guess what? That AP sold for close to $5,000.
I think over.
Somewhere around there. I can't remember exactly. And it's the exact same case, the exact same everything but dial, and this has gold on it. And this one, you know, this is not supposed to be a pitch. We're only asking $2,000.
Right, just under.
Now, why is that? Now, obviously, we're businessmen, right? We know, we try to figure out what people are willing to pay for watches. There's a market for watches. And just because this dial says Chopard,
right,
and not Audemars Piguet, we would charge over $2,000 premium on the AP.
And that's just today. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago when Chopard had a lot more market presence, a lot more notoriety, this would have gone for a lot more. And it probably did. But this is the only one I could find, besides one other vendor in the world that's selling this watch. I know that doesn't say a lot, but it definitely speaks to its rarity.
You know who else makes this?
Who else makes this?
Baume & Mercier.
They make the same one.
Well, they made. So, guys, AP, Chopard, Baume & Mercier,
Using the Jaeger movement.
all using the Jaeger movement. The AP, just because of the little initials on the dial, is more than double the cost. Way more than double the cost. And I'm sure if we had the Baume & Mercier, it would be significantly less expensive just because of prestige. But the tangible thing, right, the thing you actually get is the same.
And that's some value that you can only get in vintage usually, right? A JLC chronograph? Where else can you get a JLC chronograph? Ralph Lauren, the next one up, and that's 3 times the price.
Well, yeah, and JLC Chrono, I think they retail for what, around $9 grand now? That's retail, full retail. And pre-owned 6? 5, 6?
Depending.
Yeah, so vintage is absolutely the way to go. Tongue twister. However, you have to be careful when buying vintage.
Right.
And we have an example here, which is actually a pretty good example, but we're professionals, right? We do this for a living. So, John, why don't you tell the audience what this is?
Sure.
And a couple of things that are wrong with it, or not so much wrong with it, but a couple things that have to be done to it
Right.
to bring it up to snuff.
Sure. So this is a Rolex 6694 gold cap oyster date precision manual winds.
Now, gold cap. What is gold cap?
So-
a lot of these guys don't know.
For those of you that don't know, gold cap is very similar to gold plated in that it is a stainless steel watch. The case back is stainless steel, but the rest of the case is capped or plated in gold, as they call it.
Well, it's better than plating, though, because it's instead of bathed, it's like an actual piece of very thin gold.
Sure. It's kind of like if you buy an ice cream sandwich and it has that chocolate on the outside that snaps when you bite into it. That's this, so it doesn't rub off as easily.
Don't you love how eloquent we are? Like, it's like an ice cream sandwich.
This is an ice cream sandwich. But the thing is, with a watch of this kind of age, you have to look at the dial. This one happens to have staining on the dial, but for some people in the vintage community, that's favorable.
So a lot of people say, well, Federico, what's the difference between damage and patina?
Sure.
Nothing. Patina is damage.
Yes.
However, it's aesthetically pleasing damage.
How uniform.
Exactly. Now, we purchased this watch as watch dealers, obviously to resell it, but we purchased it knowing we'd have to do a little work on it. So why don't you mention a couple of things that need some work?
So the other things that need work are the crystal. The crystal is damaged. You know, we couldn't tell by the customer photos, but the crystal is damaged. It's not sellable. We need to replace the crystal.
So new crystal right off the bat.
For someone that's buying this watch, like yourself, that may not be a dealer or may not have access to crystals, even if they're aftermarket, that's kind of a big problem, especially if you live in parts of the country or the world where it's not so easy to get these things changed out, or it's expensive.
Yeah.
So you have to consider that, the crystal. The other thing is
An overhaul.
overhaul.
It automatically needs an overhaul. What is an overhaul? Just a full service. So we're gonna have to give it to Hansi,
Timekeeping.
who's gonna tear it apart. He's gonna re-lubricate. Well, first ultrasonically clean it, because this has like 60 years of dust on it, and lubrication.
Sure, and the thing is with vintage, depending on where you purchase the watch, all dealers and all sellers have different specifications to what they consider good timekeeping for a vintage watch. Us, we make every effort to make sure that the watch is running within decent specs, reasonable specs.
I would say on a vintage watch, plus minus 15 seconds a day
Absolutely.
is fine. And and a lot of you guys, I don't mean to burst a bubble, but like, oh, I have a Rolex chronometer from the 60s. It's never gonna run chronometer spec. It just isn't.
It's too old.
And this happens a lot in the service department.
Absolutely.
Even at Richemont when I used to work, where the watchmaker's like, you have to tell the customer, like, yeah, it's a chronometer, but this thing's 60 years old, 50 years old, 40 years old. It will never run like that again.